Hello, it's the 6th of May 2021, which means that today is the 35th birthday of the first singles compilation album by a band called The Cure, called not called Staring at the Sea, called Standing on a Beach. The visual version of it, released on VHS, was called Staring at the Sea. And this version, in a card sleeve that was inside the French box set assemblage, for some reason, is called Staring at the Sea as well. I don't quite know why, but there you are. And the cover for this is somewhat different to the cover that's on the LP, which I'll show you later on. Now, I've been feeling every one of my years so far in the past couple of months, because it seems like you can't go a day or a week without the anniversary of a Cure album coming out. I should point out, I did check on that well-known and reputable site of Honest Truth Wikipedia, and it appears that every Cure LP, from Three Imaginary Boys through to Wild Mood Swings, was released in April or May, with the exception of today's featured album, The Head on the Door, which was released, I think, in August, 26th of August, according to my computer, 1985. And today I'm going to talk about Cure album, Head on the Door, the singles that go with it, the motion picture film, The Cure in Orange, which still bafflingly has yet to have a release. And I'm going to start off by something that I forgot to mention in the last time I talked about The Cure, which I really should have done, which is this here, The Cure live in Glasgow. It's an unofficial DVD that was released on a label called BBC Films and DVD. Clearly not an actual legitimate BBC DVD, by the way. This is the oldest DVD of The Cure I've been able to find, performing live at the Glasgow Barrowlands, pretty much in my top 3 venues of all time. The other two, by the way, both now demolished, the London Astoria and I think the Leamington Spa Assembly Rooms, which has been closed. And the third one in that holy trilogy of fantastic venues is Glasgow Barrowlands, where this was filmed in 1985 and broadcast on, I think, the Oxford Roadshow on British television. I put a link to it on my episode about the previous Cure album, The Top. I should have mentioned this in that episode, but I am forgetful and I'm a bear of little brain, and therefore I didn't mention it. So I'm going to pick up the Cure story in 1985, and this is where the band's probably most popular lineup first coalesced. So we had the 5 members, with Simon Gallup rejoining on bass, and Boris Williams on drums, Paul keyboards, guitars, and saxophone, or if you're Homer Simpson, saxophone. Lol on keyboards, and Robert on vocals, guitar, and Hairspray. Now, the first fruits of this album were the single, which everybody knows, I think, Inbetween Days. Here's the 12-inch. I don't have the 7-inch because I've never been bothered to buy it. And the 12-inch, there are 2 editions of the 12-inch. There's an American version, which has an alternate extended mix of Inbetween Days on the A sides, and there's the version in the rest of the world that has 2 B sides instead of 1. So, Inbetween Days, I think the idea behind the original Inbetween Days single was that there'd be loads and loads of colours that would be floating around, and so therefore the video actually just features lots of coloured socks. They were hoping when they were doing the video that the images would be travelling so fast that you wouldn't be able to tell that there were socks, but there were. So this is the multicoloured socks period, much like the Pet Shop Boys had a pointy hats period. And Inbetween Days is, I think, a huge quantum leap for the band in terms of popularity, but also in terms of their abilities. It feels like, the potential which they were starting to hint at with The Top has really been expanded, and that's, I think, due to the change of the players that we've got in the group. So Boris is a brilliant drummer, was a brilliant drummer. He was able to do fills and transitions and play at a standard that certainly Lowell couldn't reach, and his pounding rhythms and his ability to really add colour and texture to a track, I think elevated the band. Simon coming back in on bass gave the band a new sound in terms of their bass. Perhaps I think the bass on the Top and the Japanese Whispers era was perhaps a little less pronounced. Obviously, parts of Japanese Whispers were recorded as a duo, so it was Robert Smith playing the bass. But having a dedicated bass player as opposed to borrowing the engineer from the Pornography album that also wrote songs for Natalie Imbruglia probably elevated the Cure as well. And Simon, having been in the band since the very early days, brought it back to the start. In the same way that Paul, having rejoined the band, having first played in the band when they were in their school days in 1976 or thereabouts, had meant that really that quartet of Lowell, Simon, Paul and Robert had all been playing together in various permutations since about 1980. Although obviously Paul had left the group and then rejoined, Boris being actually the only new face in the group, but somehow managed to slip in. So Inbetween Days, when this was first played on the radio, Peter Hook's mum called him up and said, "Have you got a new singer?" Which I repeated in the previous episode about New Order. And the answer to that was no, it wasn't. It just sounded a bit like New Order. And by the way, in the Head on the Door tour book, which I have here, Robert Smith states that I think one of his favourite groups is New Order. Favourite bands. Here it says, somewhere up there, I can't remember where it is because remember I'm looking at this upside down. Joy Division, New Order, Echo and the Bunnymen and the Banshees. Man after my own heart. So I don't think the resemblance was completely unintentional. Anyway, Inbetween Days, absolutely classic song, first single from the album Head on the Door. And this is the single that I think lifted the band up to arena status in the UK. They became almost like the worst kept secret in the world, alongside New Order and Depeche Mode. And it's just a fantastic, lovely, silly pop song. And if you don't know it, why the hell have you been watching all these videos about The Cure? Now, the B-sides are The Exploding Boy, which I don't think was played live, but was played at a Peel session, and a track called A Few Hours After This, and I have an embarrassing story about A Few Hours After This later on in this episode. But the single did well, charted, socks flew all over the chart show. And this was followed up with the release in August of the band's sixth album, The Head on the Door. Now, I think, I'm not quite sure what this cover actually means. There's a variation on it here on the tour programme, which I pointed out. But The Head on the Door, I think, is probably the best Cure LP to date. It's 10 relatively short songs with the new lineup. And they were more direct, more poppy, more straightforward, but also just plain and simple weird. Now, since Robert wasn't moonlighting in the Banshees and the Glove at the same time, it doesn't have quite the sense of psychedelic, LSD-fueled or speed-fueled craziness that comes from recording 26 hours a day and working eight nights a week. So it's got a slightly more considered approach, but also the band went into the studio and did a couple of months of work before they recorded the album, when they just played the songs and played the songs and played the songs and learned the songs. And there's a depth to the arrangements of the songs, there's a precision and there's a placement of each one of the instruments that really gives you the feeling that the band have worked through these songs. Sometimes, especially with a band like U2, the finished versions on the record seem like really, really expensive demos, and actually the definitive version of the song exists on stage. But generally, The Cure don't tend to change the arrangements of their songs when they play them live, apart from A Forest. Everything else is played very faithfully to the studio recording, and everything else has been, everything on this album clearly has been played quite a few times before anybody pressed record. The demos, by the way, on the 2 CD edition of the album are really fascinating little insights here, and I've forgotten to get those demos, so I'm going to do that whilst I show you this. Pretend that I have not forgotten to get this CD, which I've just pulled out of the rack hastily. Absolutely not. That's doing it live, kids. One take me. But no, it's a fantastic 10-song LP, and really short, succinct, punchy, straight to the point. The production is fantastic. It took longer to record than any other Cure LP because Robert wanted to have a different drum sound for each song, so they had to set up the drums and the drum kits in different parts of the rooms or different studios to get different sounds. So even though it sounds like the band are all playing together, what it does is gives the album a texture which you don't always get. Sometimes if you've got an album, especially if it's with a drum machine and they just use one drum machine at one setting, the drums always sound the same. Whereas they had a different setup for the drum kits on every song for this, and it sounds like it's got a different and a variation in texture. Whereas something like The Top, for example, the drum sounds are very, very similar from song to song. Same thing with Pornography, and especially with Faith. But that's part of the uniform tone and mood that those songs were designed to create. So The Head on the Door, 10 fantastic songs, which I've already told you probably about 4 times. But it's got some classics that the band still play live to this day and are the highlights of many a gig. So there's at least 4 songs on here which I saw The Cure play dozens of times. Inbetween Days, which has been played at almost every show, like 99% of shows. I think I've missed 2 shows where they haven't played Inbetween Days. And Push, which has been played at most shows, and I think they brought Push back at one point, and you could hear the joy in the crowd when they brought Push. Certainly, I think the first time I saw them play Push, I think was Finsbury Park in 1993, and there was this moment where I was like, I get it, I get why this song is so huge. It's still an absolute classic that people absolutely love, and it's got one of the best intros to any song ever. We've got Close to Me, which is played live at almost every show, and A Night Like This, which is played at a lot of shows. It's also got a number of other songs. Kyoto Song, The Blood, 6 Different Ways. They're okay, they're pretty quirky. They kind of follow on from the mood which has been set in The Top, so kind of like an extension of that. The Baby Screams, which I don't like, actually. And then there's Screw and Sinking. And Sinking is almost like drowning in your own bed. It's just this wonderful song which has this air of despondency, pretty much like they wrote a song for Disintegration 4 years too soon. But no, so Head on the Door is a great LP, and I don't quite know why I'm telling you that, because if you've watched 12 minutes of me talking about The Cure, you'd be like, well, look, if I didn't like him, I'd have switched it off. This is an original 1985 LP, and I think I bought this from Second City Sounds, which was my favourite shop to buy second-hand LPs from because it was the cheapest. It was just out of Birmingham city centre, under an underpass, next to the huge GPO tower. It's now probably some kind of shisha bar or something like that. Now that the area has been redeveloped and they've demolished Birmingham Library. Well, I used to get all my LPs from there for about £2 £2.50, maybe even £3. And of course, in those days, that was half a week's pocket money for me. So I had to make sure that if I liked a band, every album I was going to buy was an investment, and every album I was going to buy was going to have to be bought cheaply. And every album that I was going to buy, I could buy maybe one album or one 12-inch single a week. And I did very, very well out of stretching the limited amount of money that I had through that. So we've got the album Head on the Door, and there's a deluxe edition of Head on the Door that was released here in 2000, and I think it was 2006. No, yep, 2006. So this came out in 2006 as a double CD edition, pretty much the 20th anniversary of the album. Same, I think it might have been the same week they played the Teenage Cancer Trust show, actually, at the Royal Albert Hall. And this has got the album on one disc, and it's got 14 demos on the second disc, including some tracks which have not been released elsewhere: Inwood, Innsbruck, Man Solid Gone, Lime Time, and some demos and some alternate studio versions, including B-sides like alternate mixes of Man Inside My Mouth a few hours after this, a demo of Stop Dead, for example. And then there's 3 live bootleg recordings of The Baby Screams, The Blood, and Sinking, which go alongside some of the other live tracks which have come out from around about the same era. If you're going to buy one version of it on CD, do get this, because it's got all the B-sides, or more correctly, it's got all the demos on it, which are a fascinating insight into how the band operated and how the band recorded. And you can see the songs kind of growing into themselves when you listen to the demos. Now, I'm a sucker for demos. I'm a sucker for alternate mixes. I love to see all the strokes and all the different shapes and ideas that someone was working through when they were making something. So, you know, a rough mix of something with an alternate vocal, or maybe an early director's cut of a film that's got an extra 40 minutes in it. I'm a sucker for that stuff. I'm really interested in finding the little nooks and crannies in songs and movies, books, and just going, what else could have happened? You know, and, for example, if you think about the director's cut version of films, sometimes the director's cut version of film is the definitive version, as opposed to perhaps the castrated studio edition. If you've seen a film called Kingdom of Heaven by Ridley Scott, the director's cut of that is the only way to fly. The rest of it is almost like watching a nonsensical palimpsest, or an edited for airline TV version of the movie that takes out all of the plots. Now, I'm moving on a little because there's a fair chunk to talk about through this. Second single from the album, and the first time a second single was released from the album, was Close to Me. Now, I never really understood that until I turned the sleeve upside down and went, oh, that makes a lot more sense. So there's the sleeve for Close to Me upside down. I think I might actually have a cupboard like that in my house. But the Cure do not live in my house, and this has probably one of the strangest videos, which was shot at Beachy Head with the band all inside a cupboard, playing in very, very tight and confined spaces using very unusual instruments. The keyboard lines are played on a comb. Now, I haven't had use for a comb for a number of years, but I do remember what they're called. And Close to Me, by the way, was radically remixed and altered for the 7-inch version. So it was re-recorded in some areas, and some horns and some other string sections were added to it. And that makes it an absolutely fantastic single, by the way. The LP mix, absolutely great, but the version with all the horns on is just bouncier, poppier, brighter, lovelier. Now, there was a 12-inch of Close to Me. I haven't got it. There was also a 10-inch edition of Close to Me. Here it is without a sleeve. That has all the B-sides on, and the B-sides are A Man Inside My Mouth, Stop Dead, and New Day. And New Day, by the way, is a legacy track from the Top sessions, which never made it out at the time, but was used on the 10-inch to get you to buy the 10-inch. And as I've said before, there was various formatting, so they were putting out loads of different versions of singles: double pack 7 inches, coloured vinyl, picture disc, cassette with an extra B-side recorded live in Helmand or somewhere, just to make you buy the thing so it could stay in the charts. Now, in the US, they didn't get Close to Me. Instead, they got this, which is Quadpus, which is effectively the 10-inch. By the way, this version was called Half An Octopus. This version was called Quadpus. They share the same artwork, but this version has a different running order. So this is where A Night Like This gets its single release on this lovely 12-inch, and the video was made for A Night Like This, with the band performing just in pretty much an empty room. It's backed with New Day and Close to Me, a remix of that, and A Man Inside My Mouth. You don't get Stop Dead in America. If you wanted to hear Stop Dead, you had to import the single from the UK, which I think the 7-inch has Stop Dead on, so you'd have to buy an import-only 7-inch. Undoubtedly not cheap. But no, A Night Like This, absolutely classic Cure track, still very popular to this day, and played live far more often than you might think. Now, here's an oddity for you. This is the Close to Me EP by The Cure, which is a 4-track 7-inch, which I think plays at 45. And somewhat bizarrely, it's Close to Me and Stop Dead on one side, and A Man Inside My Mouth and New Day on the other side. Which means I've got New Day 3 times on vinyl. It's not that good. But as you'll see from the photograph on here, this version was released in 1988. So after the long after the period. I have no idea why someone would say, well, let's take all the tracks off the 10-inch of Close to Me, but we'll put them on a 7-inch and we'll put it out 3 years after it's fallen out of the charts, and we'll use a picture of the band's then lineup with a keyboard player who doesn't join for another 3 years after New Day is recorded. No idea why they thought about that. To be fair, I wasn't thinking about that at the time. I was thinking, I haven't got this, I'll buy it. But if you're a Cure train spotter like me, this is worth getting if you're collecting all the vinyl editions of all the various things, because it's quite unusual. Probably you can pick it up on Discogs for about £10 these days if you know where to look. Now things went a little quiet actually. The band did lots of touring, and they did the Head on the Door tour. Here's the tour program, which I've shown you a couple of times already. I was too young to see the Cure at this point, but however, when this turned up in a second-hand bookshop for about £1, I was not too stupid as to not buy it. Now, the reason this was probably very, very cheap is, if you look on the cover here, there is a stain from a tea cup or a coffee cup. I don't discriminate. As I later found out today, that actually the tour program actually is missing its centre page. So I thought, when I was looking through this earlier, I thought, oh, maybe they've mistaken Lol and Pearl for each other. But no, I think there was meant to be a picture of Lol there, and then on a page it was meant to be Pearl, and then for some reason I think the page fell out. But 4 members of the group get interviewed here, and they have a thing which they had in all their tour programs until they stopped doing tour programs, I think, where you ask them things like, date of birth, height, weight, favourite fruit, favourite bands, favourite books, favourite actress, favourite author, football team, hero, heroine, so on and so forth. Incidentally, Simon says that his favourite music is The Cure, his favourite band is The Cure, and the best experience of his life is The Cure, which might explain why he's remained in the band ever since. Whereas the other members of the band, Boris tells you that his favourite music depends upon the moods, and Paul tells you that his favourite music is Impossible, and oddly enough, Robert doesn't mention The Cure as his favourite band either. But that's not really here nor there. I think a good quality version of this is quite expensive now and quite difficult to get. This is the only copy I've ever physically seen in my life, and as you can tell, it's been through the wars. You can see like the water stain here, where someone's clearly just spilled a cup of coffee over it, and the stain that it's got upon there, and it's just been in the wars. But that proves that it's authentic and vintage, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. Or as Indiana Jones said, it's not the years, honey, it's the mileage. Which puts the band at a bit of a crossroads, because after the Head on the Door period, it's 10 years since the band formed, and what better way for the band to celebrate their first 10 years than by re-releasing a resung, remixed version of Boys Don't Cry. And here's an iconic image that has sat upon 10,000 t-shirts over the years. So Robert went back into the studio, re-recorded Boys Don't Cry, which was resung and club mixed in February 1986, and backed the 7-inch with Pillbox Tales, a previously unreleased song from February 1979 that was again remixed in February 1986. This is the time when Boys Don't Cry finally became a hit. And I should point out that in the time between me doing my first video and now, I have managed to locate an original copy of the Boys Don't Cry 7-inch at an affordable rate. Most of the times this goes for about £70 or £80. I paid a third of that for this, and I'll explain why, because the sleeve is ever so slightly battered. If you look at the side here and at the bottom, there's minor holes, and the record has a small mark right at the end. But in order to save myself well over £50, I'm prepared to buy that. Also, the back cover, no one ever told me the back cover of the Boys Don't Cry 7-inch, the original, had Helga Never Says No on it. I'm like, my God, no wonder that song didn't make it into the top 75 when it came out, and it didn't. So it wasn't a hit, and I think the band were really surprised that it wasn't a hit when it came out. Certainly, having listened to it, I'm surprised it wasn't a hit. These days, everyone acts like it's their first big hit, and it wasn't, because it was many years later down the line, and Boys Don't Cry was resung and remixed and reissued as a 7-inch single with Pillbox Tales on the B-sides. There was also a 12-inch edition. Here it is, again with that lovely picture, the face that launched 1,000 t-shirt designs of Boys Don't Cry. And this 12-inch has a resung extended 12-inch dance version on the A side, and the B side is Pillbox Tales and Do the Hanser. Do the Hanser coming from a record label that the band had considered signing to, that paid for them to do some demos, but they said, well, actually your material's not very poppy and you should do stuff that's a bit more poppy, and so they wrote a song called Do the Hanser as a callous and vicious piss take of Hanser Records, and then Hanser were like, okay, not above being petty and vindictive, and then obviously Do the Hanser was remixed in February 1986 and issued. So this is now in America you got the remix of Boys Don't Cry as a double A side with Let's Go to Bed. I've tried to find a copy of that affordably. I can't. All the copies are in America and they're all expensive, so I haven't bought one. So following that up, of course, the remixed version of Boys Don't Cry was included in the compilation album. Here it is, Standing on a Beach, this time with its proper name, Standing on a Beach, with a picture of a wizened old man who isn't me on the cover, and it came in a gatefold sleeve, which features all the 7-inch picture singles here, featuring up there Jumping Someone Else's Train, which I haven't got, but I've got the 7 inches of all of the others apart from Inbetween Days, and I've got all of them in some format apart from Jumping Someone Else's Train, which doesn't come in under £75 in the UK, which is bizarre. I think there's a copy in Italy which is £33, but I'm not going to pay for that. And this Standing on a Beach is just one of the best greatest hits albums of all time, and it does greatest hits the way you would want a greatest hits or a best of album to go. It goes chronologically, 7-inch A-sides, journeying through history, 145 RPM 7-inch single at a time. It doesn't have any of the extra tracks on the vinyl edition. It's got all the singles stacked and racked in the order of release, and it's a wonderfully thrilling experience. And of course, it comes on an inner sleeve, and here is and in these days, you had let's think 6, 7 songs on the side of vinyl. Of course, if this came out now, it would be a double LP and it would have 3 songs per side, because they want to charge you more money by putting an extra vinyl disc in there, which is staggeringly short-sighted. Whereas this version obviously has all the songs on one slab of vinyl plastic passion. No, absolutely love it. One of the best greatest hits albums of all time, this. Absolutely brilliant. And if you don't know where to start here. Don't bother with greatest hits, get Standing on a Beach. And of course the released version of Standing on a Beach comes in a number of different configurations. So the LP version has all the UK 7-inch A-sides in order of release. The compact disc version, this copy taken from assemblage, features a number of extra tracks. So it features 10:15 Saturday Night, which was a double A side with Killing an Arrow. Play for Today, which was a promotional release. I think there's a video for it. Other Voices, which had a video made for us as well. And finally, A Night Like This, which was only released as a single in the US. And that was the CD version, so that tops out at over an hour. And of course, the CD version of Standing on the Beach is probably £1 on Amazon. So if you don't know where to start, this is the one. Never been ones to miss up a trick. The third version of the album is the cassette, and the cassette features the A-sides and all the B-sides. So let's go into the cassette, although I've got no way of really listening to the cassette. I mean, the track listing on it takes up 4 panels alone. I mean, look at that. These days it'd just be a Spotify playlist, but it's got all the A-sides, so it hasn't got Other Voices or Play for Today or A Night Like This. It's got all the selected non-album B-sides on. All these selected non-album B-sides, by the way, later appeared on the 4 CD box set Join the Dots, which was released in 2004. So you didn't need to keep the cassette version of Standing on a Beach, but I have. Who's going to complain about that? Although, on the version of Standing on a Beach that was released, it features the original A-side of Boys Don't Cry from 1979. So the remixed, resung club version made in February 1986 was only officially available on the single for a very, very, very long period of time. The first digital release of the Boys Don't Cry resung remix 7-inch is on this DVD that was released in 2001, The Greatest Hits. And I was very, very keen to rip the audio using a DVD audio extractor from here to get the 7-inch version of Boys Don't Cry resung in 1986 in MP3 format. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. DVDs, how retro. But not half as retro as VHS tapes, because the next thing that the band were going to release is this, The Cure in Orange, which I'll be talking about very, very soon. Because the first digital release of the 12-inch version of Boys Don't Cry is on this triple CD of Mixed Up and Torn Down, the remix album from 1990 that features new and contemporaneous remixes on disc 1, old 12-inch A-sides on disc 2, and some new remixes by Robert Smith. On disc 3. Sorry, I had a yawn. It's been a long day and I'm trying to cut down on my caffeine. So, Greatest Hits DVD, which leaves us with the last release of this period. And I cannot overstate how important this last release is. This last release is the thing that brought me into the world of The Cure. It was released in the cinemas on the 23rd of April 1987, 1 month before the release of the band's next studio album. And it played late night cinema screenings, and it popped up on television as well. And one of the late night television broadcasts of this is the thing that got me into The Cure. It is The Cure in Orange, The Cure's first official large scale theatrical concert film, recorded in Orange in France, I think in August 1986, over 3 nights. So I think there's 2 nights which have the audience, and then a third night where the band played maybe 10 songs to an empty auditorium whilst Tim Pope filmed from otherwise impossible angles. And this has so far been released on VHS and Laserdisc. It's never had a DVD release. There is a high quality Laserdisc rip which is on archive, which is 15 gigabytes. It turns up on YouTube occasionally at a pretty high bit rate as well. But it's never been on DVD, it's never been on Blu-ray, it's never been released as a CD or as an LP, which, given its status as a definitive Cure live document and the only professionally shot, mixed and released theatrical Cure live film from the 80s, is staggering, actually, in the fact that it hasn't been released. But if you're a Cure fan, you have nothing but a list of broken promises around archive releases, I think, really. There is one, I think, cinematic print of it that still exists, that was shown at a theatre in LA about 3 or 4 years ago. That's the only remaining theatrical print of the film that there is. So if someone's going to digitize it, turn it into a Blu-ray and release it, you're going to have to track that one down and get cracking, because you're running out of time, guys. The fan preservation options of turning it into a video file, bootleg DVDs, aren't really satisfactory. The Cure in Orange is a phenomenal live document. It is the thing that got me into the band. It was broadcast on BBC television about 11:55 in the days when television would switch off at about 1 o'clock in the morning. You didn't have all night television. You had 4 TV channels, so BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, Channel 4, and ITV ran through the night. BBC One switched off about 1, BBC Two maybe 12:30, and Channel 4 went through to about 4 o'clock in the morning. And you get some really, really unusual British television. So there'd be a show called Get Stuffed, where students showed you how to cook cheaply and terribly, which was ideal for if you had been on a night out. You came in, you get stuffed on, you went, I'm going to make that, which was never a good idea. Probably responsible for an awful lot of house fires, actually. ITV also did a show called The Hitman and Her, which is where they just went to nightclubs and they filmed people dancing and then interviewed drunk men and women whilst they talked about what they were going to do or how much they were going to drink or how much they liked Band X or Singer Y, which was hosted by Pete Waterman, who did Stock Aitken and Waterman. And there was also a show, actually, I can't remember the name of it now, where ITV would take jobbing out of work actors. A guy that had been in the bill for 5 years who left to go to Hollywood, who found out it hadn't worked, then came back to the UK, gave him a camera crew, and he'd just walk into fish and chip shops or late night curry restaurants or cab firms and go, tell us what's going on at 1:20 in the morning on a Saturday in Hackney. Car crash television. Probably the precursors to YouTubers like the Penjus Munch and things like that. So yeah, so instead of watching that, I was watching The Cure in Orange on the BBC, and I was recording it, and they showed an hour-long version of it, which ran up to a forest, which means it didn't have Close to Me, Let's Go to Bed, Three Imaginary Boys, Boys Don't Cry, 10:15 Saturday Night, Killing an Arrow Bomb. So I watched that, and I was like, this band are really, really good. They're on it. And live Cure is pretty much, the best form of Cure that there is. But imagine I was watching that and it had Shake Dog Shake, Play for Today, A Strange Day, Primary, Charlotte Sometimes, Inbetween Days, The Walk, A Night Like This, Push, 100 Years, and The Forest. But I didn't know the names of any other songs. In fact, I thought A Forest was the B-side of a track. So I was listening to it and I was going, okay, so this song is about a girl, and at the end he goes again and again and again and again and again and again and again, and I was like, I don't know what song this is. I've never heard this song, but I know it's phenomenal. So I went, after about a year of not knowing what it's called, I went to pick up a copy of the song words. This is a later edition of it in the W.H. Smith in Birmingham, and I was looking through the songs and I was going, which song ends with the singer repeating again and again and again? And I was like, right, okay. So I figure they're going to be playing the later songs. They're not going to be playing the earlier ones. And Forest doesn't have anything about that, even though obviously the lyric ends as per here. It says, there's one line again and again and again, which isn't perhaps quite as many as you might think. So I went, all right, let's have a look through and see what there's. Okay, so there's a song called A Few Hours After This, page 105 in here. And the last lyric is, I Never Saw You Again. And I thought, okay, so that song, that's fantastic, must be A Few Hours After This. And if that's a B-side, then the A-sides are going to have to be phenomenal. I was wrong, of course, because I'd mistook A Forest and A Few Hours After This for each other. I very quickly learnt the error of my ways when I bought the 12-inch, and I went, this doesn't sound like A Forest, or more correctly, this doesn't sound like the song that I heard. So I decided to actually look up the track listing of it and go, oh, all right, it must be A Forest then instead. But there you are. I'd like to thank the song words and the BBC's ability to broadcast A Cure in Orange cheaply on television for me getting into the band in about 1988. I didn't know what the songs were called. And by the way, I know this was published in 1989. So there was quite a few months where I didn't actually know what the song was called. And I didn't know, my friends at school weren't into that band. It's a thing that I have with lots of bands, actually, is that I'm pretty much the only guy I know who likes them. Like, for example, if I wanted to go and see Nights of Ebb, I mean, I know more people now, but 20 years ago, I knew next to nobody who liked them apart from me. However, I did pick up a bootleg CD release of The Cure in Orange in the days when bootleg CDs were a thing, and when the internet kicked off and people got Wi-Fi and they were all making and burning and downloading their own thing, there was, bootleg CDs, bootleg LPs. They were pretty much dying out. They became very, very rare indeed. And the people that were carrying big stocks of bootleg CDs and LPs were selling them off cheap because they had all this dead stock that just wasn't shifting. It had been sat in the racks for donkey's years and it wasn't going anywhere. So I went to a record fair and I picked up this, I think, for £5 for the double CD. I was just like, okay, sweet talking guy. That's the song that's at the end of The Cure in Orange. Let me just look at, okay, so that's a picture from The Cure in Orange. Have a look at the track listing. Now that's been substantially rejigged around to make it look like it's not the soundtrack to the Cure in Orange. But I was like, I'm betting money on that being the Cure in Orange. I'm going to go and buy it. And as it turns out, this CD is the soundtrack to the Laserdisc of the Cure in Orange that's been rejigged to make it less obviously exactly what it is. I think the Cure in Orange is long overdue a Blu-ray and CD release. It is a fantastic live recording of the band at the apex of their abilities as a 5-piece with Lol in them. So it's probably the best era ever to film, actually, of the band, whilst Lol was a member. The Cure in Orange also lent its tracks to a couple of B-sides. So here is the Why Can't I Be You double 7-inch, which has 2 B-sides from the film, 6 Different Ways and Push, live, and there's a lovely picture of, I think it's a dog or a fox on the front there, and then also on the second 12-inch of Catch. There's two B-sides, which are Kyoto Song and A Night Like This live, and as it says, B-sides, songs 1 and 2 taken from the motion picture The Cure in Orange. At the moment, the easiest way to get anything from The Cure in Orange officially is to buy this 12-inch or to buy that 7-inch, because they still don't. I think the last time they manufactured anything that could play VHS tapes in a commercial fashion was 2016. They haven't made a VHS player for the past 5 years, and laser discs are difficult to get, difficult to play, and I think the last laserdisc manufacturer was 1993, maybe the Cure in Orange had a VCD release around about the same time as Show in 1994. I don't know, and I don't particularly care. I just think it's a real shame that the Cure in Orange isn't more readily available. So that's me talking through the Cure from 1985 to 1986, through the album They Had on the Door, the compilation Standing on a Beach, Staring at the Sea. I did have the VHS of Staring at the Sea, but for some reason I threw it away. I don't know why. Presumably because I thought for some reason that all the singles and all the videos on Standing or Staring at the Sea were going to be on this DVD. When I heard this was announced, sorry, no, which means I had to then go and wait for someone to invent YouTube before I went and got it. But talking you through Head on the Door, Inbetween Days, Close to Me, A Night Like This, Standing on a Beach, the remix of Boys Don't Cry, and The Cure in Orange. A great period actually for the band, very prolific, playing live an awful lot, and as you can tell from The Cure in Orange, the shows were fantastic. And this is this VHS tape is the thing that has cost me thousands of pounds over the years, because without this, I mean, I'd have got into The Cure, but I'd have got into The Cure later. I wouldn't have seen them so much. I wouldn't have bought so many records. I probably wouldn't love them as much as I do now, because it's important to remember how you got to where you are by remembering where you've been. But that's where I'm going to wrap up, I think. Next one, don't quite know what I'm going to be talking about. You see, if it was tomorrow, the 7th of May, I think that's the 25th anniversary of Wild Mood Swings, but that means I've got to do 3 albums tomorrow. I'm not doing that just to go to the 25th anniversary of Wild Mood Swings. Or it could be the day after that, which is the 8th of May. I think there was a Cure album released on the 8th of May. Let's quickly check with Wikipedia. Yes, 8th of May 1979 is Three Imaginary Boys. 4th of May 1982, Pornography. Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, 25th of May. Disintegration, 2nd of May. Wild Mood Swings, 7th of May. Basically, May is a really expensive month to be a Cure fan, if they were still making records. But we'll get to that when we get to it. In the meantime, stay beautiful, look after yourselves. I'll post a link to the Cure in Orange if I can find one down there in the comments, and I will catch up with you some other time. It's been a pleasure. I now have an appointment with some chocolate biscuits downstairs. because to err is human and to eat biscuits is even more human. So stay beautiful, and I will see you again soon. Bye, lovelies.